Agustina Otero Iglesias, known around the world as La Belle Otero, was born on the 4th of November 1868 in Valga, Pontevedra, Spain. She had a very difficult childhood as her mother, known as Carmencita, was left alone to provide for her. She earned her living as a dancer, but the hours she was required to work and the poor pay were less than ideal for her daughter's upbringing. It's not certain who young Otero's father actually was. She claimed it was a Greek officer called Courtesan, who had met Carmencita in a flamenco venue. According to some stories, Courtesan got into a duel with one of Carmencita's lovers. Because of this, he was badly injured and shortly afterwards died of his wounds. Apparently, when she was just 10 years old, her mother was locked away due to a number of crimes. However, it's also stated that Carmencita was so desperately poor that she sent young Otero away to work as a maid. This wasn't too uncommon for extremely poor people at the time. With no one to look after her, she now had to fend for herself. Her childhood was extremely rough. As a matter of fact, young Otero was sexually abused, and because of this, she became unable to bear children. Despite all her hardships and suffering, she remained very charismatic and quite upbeat. She was even gifted with her mother's great ability to dance. It was during her early teens that she decided to change her name to Carolina. According to some accounts, she had a sister that passed away. It may have been her sister's death that caused this change in name. As a maid, she was tasked with completing many duties, one of which was getting water from a nearby well. On one occasion, while on the errand, she caught the attention of a young man called Paco. A few days later, Carolina received a letter in which Paco declared his love for her. Carolina, content by this, then asked Paco if he could take her to a tavern so they could meet in person. Of course he accepted. While in the tavern, the owners were blown away by Carolina's beauty. They believed that having her in the establishment would boost the number of customers, so they decided to hire her as a dancer. It was at this moment that her career as a dancer began, and she was only 14 years old. After a short time working at the tavern, Carolina knew she could go on to become so much more. She was hungry for success. Thus, she moved to Lisbon with Paco, who was now her boyfriend. Slowly but surely, her reputation as a dancer started to grow. Although she became more recognized, she still found it difficult to get consistent work. Apparently, while they were still in Lisbon, Paco left Carolina and broke her heart. Carolina danced wherever she could find work, from cafes to theatres, attracting and discarding admirers to help her along the way. She did what she needed to in order to survive, only staying with them as long as necessary, and then she moved on. By now, Carolina was in her mid-teens, and the details of this point of her life are quite unclear. Some sources claim she left Lisbon and travelled to Barcelona in the hopes that she would find Paco. Sadly, she had no success. But Carolina claimed that when she was 14, she married the nobleman Count Guglielmo, but it's unlikely that this occurred, as she had nothing to show for it. By the time she was 19 years old, she was living in Barcelona, working as a singer and a prostitute. Probably at one of her shows, she attracted her first long-term patron. Her lover took her to Marseille. Here she showcased her dancing and singing abilities. While there, she also won money in the casinos of Monte Carlo. This was probably what triggered her passion of gambling. Carolina made sure to cut off her patron once she no longer needed him. Eventually, she made it to Paris and became La Belle Otero, an Andalusian gypsy with an exotic style of dance. She was described as being intelligent, confident, pretty, as well as having an attractive figure. Her dark black eyes were said to be captivating, and apparently, had such an intensity that it was impossible not to be detained before them. By the early 1890s, she made it to the Folies Bergère. After months performing, her reputation started to grow around the continent. Soon, everyone had heard of La Belle Otero. People would pile into the Folies Bergère music hall in order to witness her captivating performances. By 1895, she was the most desired courtesan in Europe. Many aristocrats tried to seduce her, inviting her to fancy events, meals, and even buying her extravagant jewellery. Her career took her to many capital cities around the world. She travelled to America and conquered the States with her dance, just as she had done in Europe. She was paid very well and started to amass a nice sum of money. After the States, she did shows in Germany. She found great success there and started a relationship with a banker called Ohlstreder. He would spoil her with gifts, such as fine jewellery, expensive cars, and luxurious properties. However, things eventually ended, and La Belle Otero continued to do what she loved, dancing. On one of her tours in Russia, the imperial family travelled to the Malinka Theatre in St. Petersburg to see if she lived up to her reputation of beauty and elegance. After the spectacular show, the Grand Duke, Peter Nikolaevich, went to her dresser and asked if she would meet up with him on a future occasion. La Belle Otero agreed, and it marked the beginning of a passionate romance with the Grand Duke. Following the end of her time in Russia, she went back to Paris to fulfill the contract with the Folies Bergère. The Grand Duke, without hesitation, accompanied her for a time in Paris. Yet, the Tsar Nicholas II forced the Grand Duke to come back to Russia and fulfill the duties that came with his position. According to one story, while La Belle Otero was staying in one of Russia's palaces, the Grand Duke locked her in a room and took with him the key and her coat after an argument that they had. Otero was furious, so she jumped out of the window, landing on the snow beneath. At that time, it was the middle of winter, and temperatures were well below freezing. Fortunately, a peasant passing by on his sledge spotted her and took her to the mansion of another prince. Due to the cold, she contracted pneumonia, and it took her 3 months to recover. Night after night, La Belle Otero performed to the highest of standards. The shows were astounding, yet the overwhelming workload kept her extremely busy, and she soon forgot about the Grand Duke. La Belle Otero then had a liaison with the Prince of Wales, future King Edward VII. As many men before him, he soon fell in love with her and bought her properties. As with many of the courtships at the time, they were very short-lived. La Belle Otero had a long list of lovers, many of whom were some of the richest men in the world or royalty. During a visit to London, she met Hugh Grosvenor, the Duke of Westminster. At the time, he was among the wealthiest men in the world. They quickly developed an intimate friendship. Other lovers of La Belle Otero included Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Leopold II of Belgium, Prince Albert of Monaco, King Alfonso VIII, among others. Of course, there were rumours floating around of her relationships with other kings and even emperors, yet these could never be confirmed. However, it wasn't only aristocrats that fell for La Belle Otero. Many of her admirers included painters, writers, poets, and politicians of the time, and of course, the everyday man who lusted over her. According to some tales, a total of 6 men committed suicide after the Belle Otero ended love affairs that she had with them. It was these love affairs that made her infamous. Because of this, many other notable female personalities of the day envied her. In August 1898, she starred in a 1-minute film. In it she performed a dance called La Valse Brillante. The film was played in music halls all over Europe, which increased her demand and fame. The great courtesans of La Belle Époque were in a way the first modern-style celebrities. Reporters would follow these famous women and report on their doings. For example, their trips to the opera, theatres, or restaurants. They even commented on their hobbies and the rivalries which existed between notable women of the time. Some men even made large profits out of the great courtesans. They would take photos of them and put them on postcards, later to sell. It was sort of like an early form of paparazzi. Otero was still sought after, even as she was approaching the age of 50. It was around the end of the First World War that she was thinking of retiring. After a car accident in the early 1920s, she knew it was time to change her way of life. She finally decided to retire and moved to a large mansion in Nice, in the south of France. While living on the Mediterranean coast, she spent a lot of her time doing charitable work, but what she enjoyed doing the most was gambling. As time passed, the legendary dancer became an extremely frequent face in the casinos of Monte Carlo, Nice, and Cannes. She always stood out with her impeccable dresses and enchanting jewels. When she gambled, the stakes were always extremely high. Over the years of dancing, and thanks to the gifts that she received from dozens of lovers, she had amassed a huge fortune, worth around 400 million euros in today's money. With the passage of time, her wealth started to deplete from all the money she lost in France's casinos. After 30 years, she had lost almost everything. She went from living inside a magnificent villa to a one-room apartment at the Hotel Novelty. Towards the end of her life, she had so little money that she depended almost entirely on a pension that the Council of Nice gave to her. In her tiny room, she kept pictures on display, reminding herself of her glory days. On the 11th of April, 1965, at the age of 96, Carolina Otero died of a heart attack while she was resting in her tiny studio. When she died, she was living in poverty and totally forgotten. At her funeral, only a small group of people attended, among them a handful of her acquaintances and some of the directors of the various casinos that she had spent decades in. The newspapers reported on this story and spoke of the celebrity that once was. They mentioned her glory days at the Folies Bergère, as well as her numerous distinguished lovers. In her heyday, Otero once said, "Women have one mission in life, to be beautiful. When one gets old, one must learn how to break mirrors. I am very gently expecting to die." Thank you everyone for watching this video on La Belle Otero. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you're new, why not subscribe? If you have any suggestions, send me an email or a comment. That's all from me, so I'll see everyone in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks!